Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. We are in the middle of one of the most intense technology races in history. AI is moving faster than anyone expected. Every few weeks, we have a new breakthrough, a new model, a new company pushing the limits. But believe it or not, this isn't the first time we've seen this story play out. I'd like to take you back to another high-stakes race, one that would change the course of history forever. Let's go back to 1898, when the world was racing to achieve something that had never been done before: human flight. The government at the time put its faith in Samuel Langley. He was a renowned scientist and the secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. Langley received $70,000 in funding to build the first full-scale flying machine. He hired dozens of the best engineers, craftsmen, and assistants that he could find. The team functioned like a research lab, highly structured, methodical, and hierarchical. Each specialist focused on their individual task, working in isolation from the actual flying process. They relied heavily on theoretical calculations and meticulous blueprints they hoped would work without fail. So instead of iterating on small-scale tests, they went all in on a single grand launch. So on October 7th, 1903, after 5 years of planning, Langley's aircraft, the Aerodrome, launched. And it plunged straight into the river. Not once, but twice. But then, only 9 days after the second crash, two bicycle mechanics from Ohio successfully made history as the first men to fly a plane. The Wright Brothers started building hundreds of prototypes in 1899, just a year after Langley's team was founded. Altogether, they spent $1,000, and instead of relying on established aviation experts, they experimented through trial and error. The Wrights started small, building and testing hundreds of glider prototypes. They iterated constantly, making small changes after every flight test to ensure stability and control. They worked almost entirely alone, and with the exception from one or two assistants. So then on December 17th, 1903, the two brothers won the race against the bigger, better-funded incumbent. So why were the Wright brothers successful in a far shorter amount of time with a smaller budget and a smaller team? Well, I think this is the same reason why we're seeing today's AI companies thrive in the early stage. My name is Gabriel Valdivia, and I've spent the last decade working with early stage startups, both within large tech companies and startups. Today, I run an independent practice focused specifically on helping early-stage startups take flight. At Meta, I worked on Facebook's first VR app, kickstarting what we now know as the Facebook Reality Labs. Last year, I worked with the Daylight team to design a more mindful operating system for their debut product, the DC-1, which puts you at the center of technology. I helped the team at Gather reimagine what remote can look like for teams looking to recapture the serendipity of the open floor office. Workmate is an AI-powered executive assistant that manages your calendar and schedules meetings for you. And most recently, I've been working with a startup called Dex on a learning camera for children to explore the world. So today, I'd like to talk about the process to take these products from idea stage to reality. Now, we're all familiar with the design process. You start with a problem and then come up with many solutions. Then you present those solutions and discard the ones that don't work. Inevitably, the ones that do work will present more problems, and then you need to design more solutions and so on. So this is what I call the late stage, and this is the early stage. Now, although both require design thinking, the vantage point is actually very different. So the process needs to shift accordingly. And I actually think these are two different design roles. An early stage designer focuses on defining and validating what works, while the late stage designer is focused on refining and growing a product that already works. An early stage designer moves fast, testing and iterating and shifting directions as needed, while the late stage designer moves carefully, balancing trade-offs and ensuring consistency. One wears many hats, jumping between roles. The other delegates responsibilities and aligns stakeholders. Now, you may be tempted to think that early and late stage are two different worlds. Maybe you work for a big tech company and you think, that's all startup stuff, I don't need to worry about that. But it's common to see early stage pockets within large stage companies. They're often small, agile teams operating with a startup mindset despite being embedded in a larger organization. These pockets act as innovation engines, helping the company stay competitive and adaptive in a rapidly changing landscape. And I'm willing to bet that we're bound to see more of these as our roles shift away from maintaining existing software to incubating new products powered by AI. So to me, this is a meaningful shift, not just in what we build, but in how we work. In the past, I often saw design as something that had to be refined and polished to perfection, a precious artifact that could stand the test of time. Like most of you, I grew up admiring products that perfectly balance form and function to create timeless work of art. I, too, have tried to lick UI, and I've long admired products that sweat the details to create sublime experiences. But I've come to realize that in 0-to-1 environments, the best designs are actually the ones that are conversation starters or tiebreakers. They give teams something tangible to react to, iterate on, and build upon. They create a moment of clarity that allows everyone to move forward with confidence. At this stage, the focus of the designer isn't to create something beautiful enough to hang in a MoMA. It's to move forward by using design as a decision-making tool. Not necessarily to make the best decision, but to make as many decisions as possible. See, design can help reduce the cost of making bad decisions by speeding the time it takes to invalidate them. Quick decisions keep the team moving forward, replacing speculation with real feedback. If something doesn't work, well, that's still progress. We now know what to fix or what to avoid next time. So let me give you an example. This is Jerry Ulesman. Well, like a claymation version of him. He was a surreal photographer and professor at the University of Florida. On his first day of class, he divided his film photography students into two groups. Everyone on group A would be on the quantity group. They would be graded solely on the amount of work produced. On the final day of class, he would tally the total number of photos, and if you got 100 photos, that would give you an A, 90 photos would be a B, and so on. Everyone on group B would be on the quality group. They would be graded only on the excellence of their work. They would only need to produce one photo during the semester, but to get an A, it would need to be a nearly perfect photo. The students in group A spend the semester shooting, experimenting with composition and lighting, testing different techniques in the darkroom, and learning from their mistakes. By creating hundreds of photos, they sharpen their skills through repetition and real feedback. Meanwhile, Group B spent their time theorizing about perfection. Instead of taking photos, they debated what would make the perfect shot. In the end, all they had was speculation and one mediocre photo to show for it. Group A consistently created better work. So instead of thinking about it in terms of quality over quantity, this famous dichotomy at the center of so much of design discourse today. In the early stage environments, quantity leads to quality. Failing again and again leads to breakthroughs. In fact, this cycle of trying, failing, and learning becomes the very engine that drives innovation forward. Navigating this kind of environment requires slightly different design playbook, one that embraces speed, experimentation, and adaptability. Now, through trial and error, I've distilled 3 techniques that consistently help me and the teams that I work with navigate the chaos of early stage. I'd love to take a moment to walk you through each of these, not just as abstract ideas, but as practical ways you can show up differently in a fast-moving environment. First, and most importantly, is to lead every interaction with an artifact. It's a simple technique, but in an environment where speed is everything, it actually turns design into an accelerator. The goal is to shift the team from imagining to reacting. So, to turn abstract discussions into something tangible we can all point to, refine, and build upon. But the key is to do it as quickly as possible. That's why instead of sitting around the meeting table, you'll find me in front of a whiteboard, sketching what's being talked about, or screen sharing a Figma canvas, translating conversations into something visual that we can all align on. Not only does this help the team move forward, but it also has this funny way of changing the dynamic. All of a sudden, the designer isn't just another voice in the room, they're actually leading the conversation. This shifts the team's mindset from a scarcity mindset, that feeling that design is an expensive resource that slows everything down, to an abundance mindset. When a team has a designer that can turn imagination into tangible artifacts, well, they suddenly have a superpower where anything is possible. Instead of asking, should we do this or that, we design this and that. One of those may be a bad idea, but the best way to prove it is to design it and show it to them. And sure, yeah, that means that you may be designing bad ideas every now and then, but honestly, that's the fun part, like the design part. It surely beats talking about it for me. And more often than not, the best solution isn't just one or the other, it's a mix of both. Instead of being limited by what we can do, rapidly creating design artifacts and validating them helps the team focus on what we should do. Now, a design artifact could be any fidelity. It could be a sketch, a mock-up, a prototype, and now with AI, even a fully functional demo. And of course, the closer the artifact is to the final output, the more effective it'll be. Remember, the goal is to leave as little to the imagination as possible. But at the early stage, high fidelity is a luxury that comes with experience. What matters more than fidelity is speed, getting ideas in front of people early and often. A polished prototype is great, but only if it doesn't slow you down. If it takes too long to share your work, then you're missing the forest for the trees. So the question isn't what is the right fidelity, the question is what can you ship in a couple days or even a couple hours? The startup environment doesn't slow down for design. It doesn't wait for perfectly packaged solutions. Founders operate at a different speed and need to see ideas take shape as quickly as they can think them up. This brings me to the second lesson, which is to share before you're ready. So while late-stage designers might spend weeks polishing a deck, carefully outlining the context and trade-offs behind a decision, by the time it's presented to stakeholders who haven't been part of that process, it can feel blindsiding. They see the end result without having to see the thinking, and that disconnect can lead to brash reactions, and it can often feel discouraging and paralyzing. Early-stage designers should be sharing work every couple hours. Instead of building up to one big reveal, we work in micro yeses, small checkpoints that bring people along step by step. Instead of backtracking after getting feedback, we adjust in real time. The team isn't just reviewing the work, they're participating in shaping it. This usually happens in a public channel instead of private DMs. I know that when something isn't fully baked, it's easy to worry that others will judge the quality, question your thinking, or misunderstand where you're headed. That fear is real, and it doesn't go away overnight. But working in public not only keeps the team aligned, but also builds a collective history of how the work has evolved over time. And more importantly, individual designs are not judged in isolation. When you share often and openly, you aren't forced to pack in all the context into every single artifact. Because everyone comes along for the process, what really matters is the cadence of sharing. When you let people in while the work is still forming, you make space for collaboration and momentum, not just approval. It might feel comfortable at first, but that discomfort is where progress starts. Over time, feedback becomes less of a verdict and more of an essential ingredient that helps shape the end result. Psychologists actually call this the IKEA effect. See, when you buy a pre-assembled cabinet, well, it's just a cabinet. But when you spend an afternoon wrestling with an Allen wrench, following those cryptic instructions, and you finally step back to admire your slightly wobbly but fully functional creation, well, that cabinet means more to you. You built it, you suffer for it, and because of that, you value it more. This same principle applies to product design. When the team sees the idea go through a rough sketch to a real thing, they feel ownership. They're not just reacting to an artifact, they're part of shaping it. And that's why sharing your work early and often isn't just about speed, it's about buy-in. The more the team engages with design artifacts, the more invested they become in the outcome. They don't just approve the final product, they believe in it. Okay, finally, how you share your work matters just as much as what you're sharing. How you talk about the problem, highlight the opportunity, and frame the solution, it all shapes how people receive the work. So here are a few simple ways that I like to do it. First of all, your energy sets the tone. If you sound disconnected, people will mirror that. But if you show up with excitement, curiosity, and conviction, others will lean in. This doesn't mean you need to be overly polished or performative. It just means that you need to be genuinely excited about the problem you're solving and the progress that's being made. So when you present, don't just show the work, show that you care. It makes a difference. When it's time to share an artifact, I try not to share static mocks. Instead, I record short walkthrough videos to guide people through my design thinking. I try to always create a simple prototype to show work in context. I avoid panning around Figma files, which can feel disorienting to anyone unfamiliar with it. And so this shifts the focus away from the noise of my design process and onto what actually matters, which is how the product feels in action. I start by outlining the insights behind the solution, the problems, and the key trade-offs to consider. And then wrap up the presentation with key open questions to help guide the feedback I'm looking for. This helps the team not just see the design, but understand the thinking behind it. And although 0 to 1 projects don't usually have existing design systems, I try to create a small set of styles for each project. Basic colors, icons, and typography. This helps me move fast and set the tone of the product from the get-go. Similarly, auto layout pushes me to design a product how the engineering team would build it, which speeds off handoff and removes the need for specs or red lines. I bring my designs to life through local prototypes for repeatable UI elements across different screens in the flow. This isolates the complexity into smaller chunks that, over time, add up to a larger whole. And when it's time to share the Figma with the team, I try to follow a predictable structure. There's always the latest page, that clean, digestible snapshot of the current thinking. This is the version the team can trust, the one that reflects where we are. And then there is the scratch pad, where everything else lives. Every messy interaction, half-baked idea, and wild exploration lives here. This small structure gives the team a reliable source of truth, while giving designers the freedom to explore without cluttering the main narrative. So when you lead with an artifact, share before you're ready, and communicate with clarity and enthusiasm, you create momentum. Together, these techniques create a steady beat of progress that invites collaboration and builds trust. These principles have helped me through the chaos of early-stage teams, and I hope they help you too. Now, early-stage companies don't wait for perfect conditions. They move fast, test constantly, and adapt in real time. They don't spend months debating the right approach. They put something into the world, learn from it, and refine as they go. Designers working in that environment need to adapt. We can't rely on slow, rigid processes. We have to rethink how we collaborate, communicate, and bring ideas to life in a world that's only moving faster. So our role isn't just to make beautiful things. It's to make beautiful things happen. To give teams something tangible to react to move ideas forward and turn uncertainty into action. Because in the end, that's what separates the teams that will define the future from the ones that get left behind. Thank you.